everyone. Today's Friday, December 11th, 2020. The time is 9:03 a.m. I'd like to welcome everyone to a special meeting with our Buildings and Grounds, and officially calling the meeting to order. Attending Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Our first business item, and this will be headed up for us by our consultant, Sean, and it is the Lombard Conrad Architects proposed contract for the new building. And Ken with LCA Architects is online with us. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Sean, you want to take it away from here, sir?
Sir, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Ken.
Okay.
He's just going to kind of walk through the ups and downs of the contract. You know, we're not probably going to go through all of it, but I'll take it up with Ken. He and I have already been through it a couple times, so go ahead, Ken. It's all yours.
Okay, great, thanks. So what we did on this contract is I really kind of based it off of the contract that we had for the Kootenai County Jail. So the terms and conditions are very similar to that project. The fee percentage is very similar to that project. On this one, I just broke it out a couple different ways into two different phases. The phase one services being the initial programming and concept design through design development, and having a dollar amount set to that. And then the second phase would consist of doing the actual construction documents, getting product ready for bidding and construction. So all of those include in phase two services. Now, the way that I broke out that fee is basically based on, since I know that you're going to hire a construction manager who's going to put together a pretty tight construction cost for the project. We're liking to base our fees on those construction budgets right now so that they're not to exceed. So we base it on a percentage of an overall kind of a guaranteed maximum price that construction manager would set. We're setting that at a little lower percentage fee than we typically would. But I'm anticipating just a slightly higher construction dollar amount versus the RFP that you sent out based on square footage and what we kind of think that the project, may come in cost-wise. So that's how we're setting up our fees for that. Sean and I were talking, our fees include architectural, structural, mechanical, electrical, and landscape architect. And I believe we had the civil engineer and the geotech being provided by the county, given that the county already has some pre-selected list of consultants that they already have agreements with and can just enter into contracts directly. And our civil engineer that we had on the team is already on that list. And then the geotech can be anybody that's on that list that Sean's worked with before and has a good experience. In doing that, you're kind of reducing the amount kind of our fee because we don't add that additional amount onto the civil engineer and the geotech. So those are just direct pass-through, directly billed by those consultants to the county, and that saves a little bit on the fees overall. Other than that, we had a letter early on in the original RFP. You had asked for $5 million in liability insurance, and we typically carry the $2 million. And you had a letter reducing that there. Just so you know, if you would have stayed with the original $5 million in liability insurance, the way that AIA contracts are written, those additional fees for those additional coverage is typically passed on directly to the owner because it's their requirement that we carry that. And I had looked into that, and then it was an additional $9,000 a year, and then you decide how many years you wanted us to carry that. So that would have been a reimbursable billed to the county if you would have kept that requirement of 3, 4, 5 years times $9,000 that we would have had to carry that insurance. So that definitely was a cost savings going down to our typical $2 million liability limit. So that was a good one there. Other than that, are there specific questions that you had on that?
Bill, Leslie, any questions?
I don't have any.
Hey, Ken.
Go ahead, Sean, please.
Yeah.
A couple of things that you and I talked about, maybe you could cover how we came to an agreement on the travel part of it, the reimbursables, and how you figured what you figure your rate is going to be for reimbursables. And also, commissioners, just so you know, that, I just totaled up the fee for the contract. So, and that's why I would like Ken to just discuss some of the things that you're going to see bills for that are not included in this contract.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, and some of this kind of came from the jail project before. The county, the previous commissioners had limited the reimbursables to that design team to a certain amount, and closer to the end of the project, that design team had to come back and ask for additional funds to increase that amount. And I don't really like doing that, especially on reimbursables, because I'd rather it be exactly what we spend directly passed to the owner, with that minimal markup. Because if we set an amount of reimbursables, we're always overestimating what that dollar amount is going to be. And let's just pretend, $50,000. Well, if we only spend $30,000, we're still billing the county for $50,000, right? I would prefer that what we spend on reimbursables to be exactly what it is, so that the county kind of minimizes that cost on those. And mainly because, we're still, Idaho based, but we're not necessarily local there. That's, a benefit kind of to us to get these projects and minimize those reimbursable amounts that we estimate for the county, so that we can work all over the place. One thing I do want to mention on the Phase 2 services, where we're basing our fee on, and so we have to set a dollar amount, right, so that we have money in there to start billing against before that general contractor or the construction manager comes up with his guaranteed maximum price. So what I did was I assumed a construction cost of $24 million, and then based our Phase 2 services off of that number, the 5.5% of that number. Now, the contract is also written that says, okay, if our fees based on a percentage of the GMP, if that GMP happens to be more than $24 million, then we get a fee adjustment up to that amount that the contractor is going to build the project for. So if he builds the project for, $28 million is the construction cost versus the $24 million, then we would get an additional fee of that 5.5% of that difference.
Ken, this is Chris. What happens if the construction sum is lower? Say instead of 24, it comes in at 16 or 17?
Right. That's a risk that we take on our end. So I based mine on $24 million, If that project comes in 22 million for the contractor's GMP, then we do an adjustment to the contract the other way.
Okay.
So our fee gets set. Let's see. Let me read what it says. Our fee will be converted into a lump sum amount after the county accepts that contractor's GMP price. So if the contractor's price is, let's say, $22 million, and we had $24 million, then we would base our fee on that $22 million at the same percentage and set that fee, which is actually would be lower than the contract that you have in your hand now. So there's a possibility of going both ways. So that's risk that we take as the design team, trying to estimate what the construction cost would be, and really try to get that right on. But yeah, it could be adjusted lower on our end.
Thank you.
Ken, this is Sean. I have a question. After our space planning meeting, it's becoming pretty clear that this looks like it's going to be 2 buildings now instead of 1, to get the desired square footage. So does that change anything in this contract if that's the road the county decides to go down? Or would you just be basing it off the 2 buildings and the total square footage of those 2 buildings and then the cost of the buildings?
So it would be based on the overall cost of both of the buildings if there would be 2 buildings.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
So for an example, I just have a spreadsheet up right now. The RFP kind of mentioned about a 75,000 square foot building, and we're seeing costs, around $300 a square foot, which is $22.5 million. Now, based on our meetings with the owner and going over the square foot requirements with the users group, we're closer to 90,000 square feet of a building, which is $27 million. Whether that's split up into 2 buildings or 1 building. So that kind of gives you an idea, square foot wise, what the program is looking at the moment. Now our next meeting with the users group is really going to go over and validate, okay, here's what you told us, this really the square footage that you want, and then we'll have a better number square footage wise to know that overall and kind of come down to a better cost. Now my cost, the $300 a square foot, kind of average out, courtroom versus general office versus the detention area, and kind of an average of those 2. Now there's always the case where the contractor, his guaranteed maximum price may break out to be something like, $325 a square feet or $400 a square feet. It's right now it's just kind of our best educated guess to get kind of a budget amount for the county to work with.
Ken, this is Chris again. For budgetary purposes, I just want to make sure I'm interpreting your quotes correctly. Okay, so for I'm on your page 20. Okay, so
yes.
Okay, phase 1 services. Okay, 693.6. Right.
Yes.
Okay, so then we come down to, let's say, based on an assumption of $24 million times 5.5% plus the 1.32, whatever that calculates out to, correct? Well, I'm sorry, it's equal 1.32 million plus the electronic design. And then phase 2, which is the 1.355. So totaling up those 3
yes.
would give us a budgetary amount for a $24 million build.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The 1,355 plus the 693.
Oh, okay.
for a 24 million.
Okay, but what about the,
No, that's already in the cost.
oh, that's already in the cost.
He figured that into the cost.
Okay, so basically then what we're looking at is something around basically 2.049 million is what, okay. I got it, thank you.
Yes, 2048600.
You got it, exactly, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Ken?
So Ken and I are gonna be working in this next round of Zoom meetings to get it down from 90 to what's reasonable. There were some things that were asked for that are not reasonable, so we're gonna take that out. We know what that is. That's coming out right off the top.
So you mean the square footage?
Yes, yes, because some courtrooms
Yeah,
are not gonna be as
exactly.
big as what they want.
And some of those areas that, we should be able to save some square footage cost is, for example, every department wants 4 or 5 different conference rooms, right?
Yeah,
If we
right.
can combine, a couple floors and to share, 3 or 4 conference rooms, then we're eliminating a lot of square footage on those floors and saving cost, right? If we don't need to add separate private bathrooms for every staff on every floor, and they can, utilize the common public bathrooms, that saves a lot of square footage. Break rooms, we talked a lot about break rooms. Each different department would like their own smaller break room, to accommodate, 10 people or whatever. But if we can eliminate that, make a little, medium-sized break room on one floor that the building shares, and each different department have a small little coffee bar area, then we can definitely save square footage there too. So that'll be part of the design process that we're going through in the next, month or so with the departments to lay out those spaces and really narrow that square footage down, see how it breaks out into floors, and see if we do need to separate out, two different buildings.
Good enough.
So the way it's looking right now is the 15,000 square feet per floor will not fit in that space. It's too pressing. It's probably not even gonna be code, the distance for fire between the buildings. It's just that tight. So he had a couple different, Leslie saw them, Ken had a couple different just drawings out of like, one building could be 12,000 square feet, and then the other building over here could be 6,000 square feet, and a couple floors here and a couple floors there.
But why can't we go up instead of going out? Once we get into a second foundation, the cost increases
That's a
dramatically.
question for Ken. If you wanna go up and make it 6 floors.
Ken,
I don't
we
really know.
just invested $4.7 million in a building. It's actually more than a building. It's sitting on 11 acres in Hayden. And I think it's somewhere around 59,000 square feet of commercial space. Now, we can't occupy that for, 3 years anyway. But that should allow us to limit the amount that we need to build down here, at least try to get as much as we can into a single structure.
No, because
No.
you need justice services here.
Because-
The whole
right.
thing is justice
No,
services.
that I get.
Right, this building is almost entirely justice services. We don't even, at this point in time, we don't even have community development. The only really non-related justice service thing that's moving into this building is the VOCC.
Yeah, is the 8
The
of
rest
us.
of it's all courts, bailiffs,
Keep going.
prosecutor, public defender, and then, Barry McHugh wants civil on his floor now. There were a lot of things that went on in the meeting.
What are you doing with juvenile detention? Not detention is different, I'm sorry. A Deb's group, probation.
They're staying where they're at.
Yep.
Yeah, because if we just keep bringing people in, it's just gonna keep getting bigger and more expensive, so, they're fine where they're at. Barry's talking maybe in the future of bringing it back,
Diversion.
diversion, but we decided not to do that. But, You know, like Ken said, there were a lot of things, you know, everybody we talked to, can you share a conference? No, I have to have my own conference room. And I have to have a big one, and then I have to have a small one. I mean, we talked, almost every one of them, I think, Ken, we talked about a room the size of 1A, and then dividing that up with folding walls for, you know, and the sad thing is, pardon me, most of the time those rooms will sit empty. Most of the time. Carlene had requested a courtroom that seats 100 and another courtroom that seats, two courtrooms that seat 75.
Okay.
Well, so I'm just saying there's square footage that we're gonna get a bunch of
So
that.
what, okay, have you guys looked at the annex as a potential site?
We're looking right now at the piece of property that between the west side of the Justice and the gas station. Here's the problem if you take the annex. And Ken, you tell me if I'm wrong. It's gonna be a stretch right now, no matter how big the first building is, with the city as far as parking. Okay, so we have the stuff across the street, and I think we're fine with that. I really do, because in this case, we don't have to have a traffic study. We're not bringing a bunch of new people in. We're just diverting how we do business. If we take the annex, we're gonna lose about 25 parking spaces, and they're gonna want those back. Guaranteed.
Yeah, but what if you have parking underneath?
Well, then that's something you can decide. You know, you could do it a number of different ways, and we'll talk about that as the days go by.
I don't wanna tie
Yeah,
up Ken
yeah.
either, okay.
Right.
That's fine, okay.
So,
So any other questions for Ken? So we don't,
So let me talk to that parking thing.
sure.
Based on the square footage in the building and the city's requirements for parking, it was around 250 spaces or 280 spaces that this building would require.
and so if we shrink the square footage down, then we shrink down the requirement for parking.
Understood. So we have how many spaces during the day across the street? Is it 200?
I believe it's 220.
220.
It goes all the way down to the museum and includes the museum.
On an average day, how many do we use?
Oh, if Pete's got juries going, maybe 30 or 40. I think you're gonna be fine with what you have
okay.
across the street. I don't see that as a problem. Because we're not, at this particular point, it's not like we have an office of 200 people in Spokane and now we're gonna build this building and they're coming here. The only people that'll impact your parking, and that's not really even that much of an impact, is the public defender's office, because they're down here most of the time anyway. So I think you're fine. It's just, you know, I think the problem over on the annex side might be drainage, because the swales that take the water from the building and the parking lot are those two over there. So, but I'm not an engineer,
Anyway,
and that's up to
okay.
the engineer, so.
Anyway, I guess we need to look at all options anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for Ken? No?
So then I would request that if you guys are fine with this, I'll turn it over to Dave Ferguson and let him look at it, and then.
So Ken, after your portion of the meeting, we're gonna be talking about funding sources. So is there going to be a point where you're gonna let us know when, phase one is going to kind of wrap up and phase two is gonna start, so we can make sure that we are going ahead with the project? I mean, we have to get it done. It's just we have to make sure that we have the funding. So, I mean, for me, I'm committed to phase one. And then after that, you know, I think we just need to make sure that we are 100% going forward. So is that something that you'll be like, okay, 30 days, phase one will be done? Or is that something that we can be in communication about?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I broke out the contract that way, so that they could be separated out. And if the funds weren't available to kick off phase two, we could finish phase one, have design development done where we would have floor plans and elevation concept of what the building would look like. And the contractor could take those, or the general contractor could take those, look at it, do a price analysis on it, and come up with that budget, and then we would know. our schedule, I think, I don't have that one up, but it had the dates for that phasing, and it was, I think, into April, I think.
Okay. And actually, April works out perfectly because then we'll know what the legislation did to our revenue sources.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
What they did is right.
Let me,
We're gonna do something.
let me,
The other thing too, while he's looking that up, is
Yeah,
at some point we'll have to start thinking about that CMGC, because that's gonna be the driving factor for how much it actually costs to do the building.
Right.
You know, that's when the fluff and all the other stuff starts coming out of there.
Right, but is it too late to wait till the end of phase one?
I know that's a good question for Ken. I think it would be, because you really need that person involved.
Okay, so, Ken, can you let us know when we should start that CMGC process?
I mean, April's really not that
yeah,
far off. It's 4 months.
Yep.
Because I thought the calendar showed
yeah,
it.
Sean and I were gonna get together in January and start looking at that,
Okay,
Okay.
fine.
and start, advertising,
That works. Okay.
And I do have to say, I think that's the way to go to really narrow in the costs on a project, is get that construction manager involved ahead of time. I think you're ultimately, saving yourself a lot of headache, because extraneous cost stuff can be weeded out while we're doing the documents along with the construction manager, rather than bidding it out and getting the lowest bidder and then having them have changeovers over and over and over to, add costs on a thing. So it's definitely a very good collaborative process to have that construction manager on board ahead of time.
Good enough.
All right, thank you.
One more question,
Yeah,
Ken.
go
What would you suggest would be a good contingency for this? 10%, 5%? Because that has to be taken into to account of the budget. We can't just go in it with what we say we
Yeah.
think it's gonna cost.
Yeah, 10%. So we'd be around that $2 million contingency.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. I just want to make sure that when we go into the next discussion, that everybody has some idea of what else is out there. Because you're looking at probably, I would say for this, probably $500,000 maybe in permit with the city, and the sewer cap fee, and then you're gonna have your geotech.
I mean,
and your
we're
sil-
starting to push $27 million here.
Yeah,
Well, that's based off of 90,000 square
90,000
feet. So
square feet.
we'll have many conversations about this, and really, to me, it's just gonna come down to how hard you three wanna hold the line. Because you weren't in the meetings, Ken and I were in the meetings. No, I can't share my conference room. No, I can't share a break room. No, I can't share a bathroom. I mean, so at some point in time,
Well,
you're gonna have to make the hard
Yeah,
decisions.
yeah, we will, yeah, you're right. But anyway, let's move
Okay,
on so we
let's
can
go.
get into the question of financing. Ken can get on with what he needs. Are we okay then with Ken? Can we move on?
I'm fine.
think so.
Ken, thank you very, very much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Well, Sean and I will be talking and getting our next meeting set up.
Okay, great. Have a good weekend and happy holidays if we don't get to speak with you beforehand.
Thank you. You too.
You bet.
See you, Ken.
No, Lori Thomas is
Oh,
on.
Lori's on. Okay. Sorry, Lori, I didn't, okay. And there's really nothing to be done on that. Okay, so new building funding options. I don't know where to start with this. I've got some radical thoughts, but, okay, Steve, 27, I'm not spending 27 million,
In
I
my-
can tell you right now.
I'm gonna be
and-
realistic first, before you go any further. I see it as probably around 20. Okay?
But we're moving in the right direction.
I see it, I think a realistic is 20. Now,
But if you break that up over 6 years,
Right.
then it's gonna be a little bit more manageable.
And that's the glory. Here's the way I could see that this could go down. Give me a second, Dina, but we'll go ahead and we'll get the CMGC, because the sooner we get the CMGC, the more money we save. We'll set it up so that if it's 2 buildings, both buildings are included in the CMGC's contract. We're gonna make sure that whoever we select as a CMGC has a team that they can devote to this design. We'll get back to them in a week or two. We want them to be interlocked as soon as we can, because that's really why the jail expansion was so successful. We'll set it up to where at the end of phase 1, then the CMGC will do the same thing as the architect, and they'll make an amendment to their contract for the price of building the building. So you won't be on the hook right away. If you defer it out to 2 buildings, it's gonna take you 6 years to build. You can drag it out if you want to. Everybody's gonna make their money. Once construction starts, you're gonna build one and then build the other, and you can defer the costs off for 6 years. And you probably, that's why I was saying back in the Kootenai conversations that you probably could pay for it all. It would just be taken out over an amount of time.
Go ahead, Dina.
Go ahead, Dean.
Well, and that kind of coincides with the discussion we had with the treasurer yesterday. So Keith and I sat down with the treasurer. We came up with some very loose numbers because, as you know, we're in the middle of the audit. We haven't done our equity roll yet. So I'm going to throw some numbers out here. And I don't believe that I backed out the 4.7 from my estimate on what's budgeted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some numbers. These are loose numbers. And then Steve will talk to you more specifically about borrowing.
Okay.
Okay, so, in order of liquidity, assigned fund balance, which is what we're used to seeing, 11.9 million.
This is current, right?
So is that then minus the 4.7 out of the 11.9?
No, because that's in the budget.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so-
11.9 assigned fund balance. Unassigned fund balance, that's your 2-month cushion, 14 million. Now, know that now your 2-month cushion for 2021 is going to be 16 million. Okay, so just keeping that in mind. And again, these are
Okay.
unaudited, just, okay. So right now, in capital, what's budgeted? Because you can decommit money that you have in the budget that you put in there to do stuff like on-base and software infrastructure and, you know, other stuff. So right now, sitting in the budget, less the 4.7 you just spent, you have 1.8 million plus 1.5 million for this year's committed budget items.
Did you say 1.2 plus 1.5?
Yes, so that gives you about 3.2. Okay, so now you're up to about
That's
29.
3.7.
Okay,
1.8 plus 1.5?
yes,
Oh, 1.8, forgive me. Okay.
yeah.
3.3. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so that's if you want to decommit things that are already budgeted or in progress. Then, of course, you have the foregone taxing authority, which is right now at 10.6.
And probably destined to climb.
Well-
Well, maybe not based on what they do.
Well, it depends on how much taxes you want to take in 2022.
Yeah, okay,
So
that's-
right now, the foregone balance is sitting at 10.6.
Probably the highest in the state, I would bet.
Yeah. So now you're up to about 40. Okay. And then Steve is going to talk about a long out in the future liability sitting in solid waste that we possibly could borrow. That's about $9.5 million right now. So I'm going to give the floor to Steve if you don't have any questions at this point.
Good job.
Okay, cool.
Simple and comprehensible. Thank you.
I haven't really prepared anything.
That's okay.
Based on the conversations that you and I had earlier this week, Chris, I was under the impression the build was going to be about 15 million.
That is correct, Steve. That's the figure I gave you.
Right, and I think you're going to probably be targeting something closer to 20 based on what you guys just spoke about.
Right. Unless we can make other adjustments.
I also heard Sean speak about the high end of the the 90,000 square feet, and then the contingencies and all that other stuff. Now we're at 30 million-ish. Maybe what I'd like to do is walk back just a little bit first and remind the board that you have a lot at your disposal. So this is off the cuff. I haven't checked this number.
Okay.
I believe the borrowing capacity for the county is 2% of the market value of the entirety of the county. So that's $400 million. We can issue lots of different debt through a public vote. So at the high end, and I'm not even suggesting that we're even going to entertain that, you've got a lot of borrowing capacity. Now, when it was at the $15 million number, I was thinking that we might be able to utilize basically internal funding sources, which would not require us to go out and borrow money from outside. We would be borrowing internally from the enterprise fund and some other free cash that I think is out there. But in my wildest dreams, I don't think we're going to get to 20 or even 30 million. So to bring the conversation back to where I think it needs to focus, at least to help me understand what you guys want to do, is give me a number where you think you want to spend on this building, and then I'll tell you how you're going to have to get there, whether it's going to be a public vote, whether it's going to be an annually appropriated lease structure, whether it's going to be internally funded. So that's what I'm asking you guys. Tell me how much money you think you need, and then I'll come back to you and say, okay, well, if you want 30 million, it's going to be a public vote.
Just help me out. When you mentioned the 400 million earlier,
Yeah.
was that the total valuation?
Well, what is our mark? I don't see an assessor in here. I think the limitation is 2% of the market value of the county.
Okay.
So we got a $20 billion, 21, you guys probably,
Oh,
22.
okay, thank you. So the 400 million was at the 2% level.
Right.
That's fine.
Right.
I'm okay.
But obviously you'd have to go out and do a public vote. No one's going to allow us to borrow 400 million, obviously.
We don't need it.
Right. So,
I hope not. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
and then there's other structures too. If you guys come back and you say, okay, we need 30 million, we don't want to do a public vote, we can do structures that avoid the public vote. I'm not recommending that we do that, but there are structures that allow you to go in debt without a public vote. So with that said, any guidance or any thoughts that you guys might have at this point in time, what you think the number's going to be would be helpful.
You can set the number. Just so you know, you can set the number. And that's what you're gonna do with your CMGC, that's what we did with the jail. We set the number,
I think there's some wisdom in that, but
you can
Right,
set
and
the
I think
number
you're right.
wherever
I
you
think
want
you're
it to be. I think if you're I'm not speaking for you guys, I'll just give you my 2 cents worth. I think that if you're looking at around 20 to 21 million, including your architect, you're probably gonna get in that ballpark. I really do. I think that's, and if you wanna tell the CMGC 18, tell them 18. If you wanna tell them 20, tell them
Let me
20.
ask you-
Because that's what we did with Slenton. We said, we have $10 million. We have $11 million, build us a jail. And they did it for 10. We came in $1 million under budget. And that's what we did with them. And that's the glory of the CMGC. They know in their mind it's $20 million, and that's including my fee. There's no, and it's to we'll structure it like we did, where it's to their benefit that the more money they save, both parties split the money, just like we did with the jail. So then it's a win-win. But
No,
anyway.
I get it. Let me ask you this question, and this is gonna be somewhat radical. Some of you are gonna flip out, but okay. How much square footage do you calculate for Ann's group?
1 floor,
One floor. How many square feet?
about 14,000
All right, now get ready. What says she can't go to Hayden? So what about the commuting time? I don't care about the commuting time, because whatever time we spend to reimburse their commuting is far less than what it's gonna cost us to add that floor. Now, I don't know that it'll work, I don't know that she'll buy into it, but she was certainly open to the idea when it was on a temporary basis because of her overcrowding. I realize you want to consolidate, I get it, okay? I'm not going to some of these sums, I'm just not, and I will not go out for public debt. You go to a vote, it's dead. Come on, they wouldn't vote in a $50 fee, they're gonna vote this in? Please, it's not gonna happen. Right. Okay, so when we decide on this figure, it's gotta be something that we can do without going out for a public vote. That's my thought. And so I think you're absolutely right, set a figure, go there, but to set that figure, let's be somewhat realistic, even if it's just a hip shot at this point.
Well, I like,
So-
part of the reason I said that is because Steve said he felt pretty comfortable around 20 million, we might be able to get that on our own, but at 30, you're gonna have to go out.
Closer to 15, I think we might be able to, and I still haven't convinced our friends on the clerk side, which are a lot smarter than I am, that it's available, but 15 million, I think, is in striking range. But again, that requires us to borrow some money internally from the enterprise fund and do some other things too.
Right. So I guess my concern is paying back whatever we borrow in whatever vehicle it is. That's my concern. So that's,
Well, and there's some other unknowns, but as we stand today, that borrowing or the cash flows that we would utilize to service that quote-unquote debt would be the expiring URDs. Or we could do what is called that annual lease appropriation.
right, but still, you have to come up with the yearly payment on that.
Right.
Where's
Again,
that
it would
money
be,
coming
it would be
from?
the URD expiration date,
Gotcha, okay.
which
Kind of
is,
what the PAC people were saying?
yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
but their numbers were quite higher than what we realized.
which would be the first choice, right? That's the first choice. And then your backup
Right.
choice, in my opinion, would be your foregone taxing authority. So if you went ahead, and I'm not as a treasurer, I'm not recommending this, but as a way of doing this, you could use or dedicate the expiring URD cash flows that we will be receiving in the form of new growth to fund any debt that we have incurred, whether it's internally or externally, right? That would be the first choice. Now, as you guys know, the legislature is considering restricting that use.
Yes.
And that might go away. So then the fallback would be, okay, we'll plan as though we're going to be able to continue to receive that. But if the rug is taken out from under us, the backup would be the foregone taxing authority, which would be your fallback. Now, as you guys know, that's also being considered as a possible taking from the local taxing district. So that also may not be there in the future. I have not yet come up with a third option, don't know if there is one, but you've got two viable, as of today, ways to fund it.
You want to restate those?
First one would be the expiring URDs,
Okay,
which is new growth.
yep,
It's actually in addition to the normal new growth that the assessor is going to calculate, because when those URDs expire, they're classified as new growth.
okay,
And I think we can quickly come up with an estimate of what those numbers are. And then if that goes away, or you decide to utilize it for some other expenditures, because that may happen, then the fallback would be the taxing authority that you have with foregone.
okay. Two options.
Two options, and me personally, I think the more palatable one is the URD. Now, I will also say, as I've consistently said, as a taxpayer, you know, I don't really want you guys to use the expiring URD cash flows. You know, I'd like that to go back to me and all the other taxpayers, but understanding the reality of the situation you're in, you're gonna have to make that decision.
What about foregone? Your view?
My view of foregone, I think foregone is the last backstop. So I think to utilize it in your contemplation as, okay, if everything goes south, we fall back on foregone. So plan utilizing another cash flow stream. And then if you're surprised, I think then you have the justification, the rationale, and to go and say, well, we don't have another choice. We're going to fall back on the foregone. That would be my 2 cents.
Is it possible to find out the difference, what it would cost a taxpayer to go out for a bond as opposed to foregone? Is that something we can calculate so we can educate people?
There is going to be an additional cost associated with issuing debt, yes. But I think that cost is negligible, considering the amounts of money that you're considering borrowing. So to me, I don't think it's a component that would move the conversation one way or the other. That's my personal opinion. We are currently in a very low rate environment, as you know. So the cost of that financing is very low. Now, if we're back in the late 70s and the cost of financing is 20%,
Oh, yeah.
then I would change my answer. But in today's environment, no.
Dina?
So just for completeness, I did a calculation. If we were to take 10 million of foregone today, it would cost a taxpayer $44 per 100,000 annually.
How much?
$44
per 100.
$44 per 100,000 of value annually to take 10 million. So that's just, that gives you some perspective. So 3 times 44 would be, what, the average house price is what, 300?
No, yeah, we're
250?
pushing 390.
But even if it's
so-
400 minus 100 for homeowner's exemption, then it's.
Right, it's,
That's true,
Yeah.
so, okay.
so it's right around $44 per
$130.
100 annually, which is pretty low considering
It's the psychological
debt
impact.
service, of course. But I'm just saying, from a numbers perspective, it's straight cash, no debt service, that kind of thing.
So if we bonded for 20 million, how much would that be?
Well, I can't tell you that, but you're not paying interest if it's
Correct.
cash.
Right, on foregone, sure.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dina.
Remember, when you bond, though, that's going to be a separate levy rate, right? So it's gonna, it won't squeeze you guys on
They're 3%,
the 3% or.
which may
new
get
growth or
capped
not,
anyway.
right. So I guess I'll leave, again, I didn't prepare any remarks, but
No, this is good.
I think Sean's going down the right path is give him a number, and you guys are probably pretty close, and you could probably be pretty close in the next, by April or whatever, to figure out what the requests have been and are they reasonable or not, then come up with a number and say, make it work.
No, I think he's right on. It's like anything else. I mean, even if you're doing a market plan, you're coming up with an objective. Or even if you're going to war, you have an objective, and then the question becomes, how do I get there? So I think you're absolutely right. What is the objective? If the objective is to keep it under, just pick a number, $20 million, boom, put the stake in the ground. Now it's a question of, back to the financing.
how we're
we
gonna
get
fund it,
there.
yeah.
Right.
And I think my gut tells me anything over about 12, 15 million, you're gonna have to do some kind of external funding mechanism. It won't be the public vote, it sounds like, so we're talking about an annual appropriated lease. Don't really wanna go down that path, but it's an option.
What is that exactly, Steve, for everyone's benefit? If you can.
Yeah, I'm not the person to explain these things. I'll give you my rudimentary understanding of it. Effectively, what you do is you create a structure, and there's about 3 or 4 different ways of creating the structure, that the people that are lending you the money, the investors, which can be individual investors, banks, could be a private placement, are lending you the money on the idea that the board, the governing board, you guys, annually will approve the payments to service the debt that you've borrowed from those investors. And if you don't make that annual appropriation, then you walk away and the investors get the property.
Understood.
Okay, now, the problem with real estate-related transactions like this is you have to basically transfer over the land to the investors. So now the investors walk away with the building and the land,
If we default.
or choose
Or-
not
or
to.
choose not to.
Yeah, you choose not to appropriate that year's annual payment. So now you guys are out, the county's out, and those investors recoup their funds
Investment.
by assuming the building that we've constructed,
The asset.
and they own the actual land underneath as well.
You're
And then-
saying earlier, you're not comfortable with this?
Well, and the cost of that is quite a bit higher, isn't it?
It is higher, but again, we're talking
You have low
tens
rates.
of thousands of dollars on a 20 million, well, we're probably talking $100,000 to $150,000 of additional costs just in legal to structure that thing. But, I mean, we're paying advisors to build the thing 2-point-some million, so it, yes, it's significant, but it's immaterial as it relates to, in my opinion, the aggregate dollars that we're talking about. It's also complicated, and we have to learn a lot here as a county whether we want to do it. But that, at a very high level, and hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly, is kind of what you're talking about.
So your preference, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, if you have a preference, is as much as possible to do it through internal funding?
Yes.
Okay.
And I know that is going to create an issue internally because we're going to be borrowing money from the enterprise fund, solid waste. And I know that our external accounts have issued some concerns with that, but I don't share those same concerns. I'm confident that we can borrow the money and that it's both legal and accounting appropriate. Now, the most that I think we can borrow is around 9 million. We might be able to push that a little bit more, and I have some ideas. But we're not going to come up with 20 or 25 million in that vehicle, I know that.
So Sean, is it, you say it's better to set the price before we get the CMGC?
Yeah, because they have to have a target.
Okay,
They have to have, because in their mind, whatever the price you set, whoever's going to answer for the RFQ is starting to calculate their profit and their expenses and all that stuff. So that's why I say, just, you pick a number and then, let them do what they do, and then you can always say, no, go back and get it tighter. But yeah.
so if we just pick 18 million, does that not include, like, they'll be like, okay, that's fine, we can do that, but you won't have carpet? I mean, I don't know how, if we pick a number, what they take away to make that number fit.
Well, what they do
At
is,
18 million, you're talking, and this is just the construction, they use the figure 300 per square foot, so you're getting 60,000 square feet. Is that unreasonable?
I think, yeah, I think you might be able to get it for a little bit less than that.
Less than a square
I don't-
foot or less than,
I don't know
Cost per
that the
square.
300 a square foot would be realistic on a project this size.
You think?
I think we need to figure out how many square feet,
Yeah,
and,
That's where-
and from that we derive, because
and I think we'll have a good eye on that
Yeah.
after this next go-around of Zoom meetings. Because, for instance, and I don't want to drag this out, but what I told them was, them being Carlene, that, there's no way we're going to have 3 courthouses that are bigger than anything Ada County has. It's not going to happen. She's not going to have a jury selection room, like LCA said, that's like a lounge. So, we just have to find a balance between enough square footage to get you by and a cost that fits into that. And you need to make sure that whatever you do, I'm just telling you right now, shell a floor. If it's 2 buildings, shell a floor on both buildings.
Fair enough.
So that you have it for the future, because it's not that much more to just shell
But
it
just so
in.
that we're all on the same page, when we come up with this figure, this target, what exactly does that include? Is it just the construction?
Yes. It's the
So,
construction and the contingency. And that's why I say,
so contractor and
20.
architect are in addition.
no, if you said 20,
Is it the whole ball of wax?
no. If you said 20, it's the CMGC
Go ahead.
and your contingency. That's what's in that.
Okay, architect.
That, all your construction, your architect,
Separate.
your geotest, your civil,
Okay, I got it.
and your permits are in addition to that.
So that's about another roughly 2.5 mil. Okay.
No, I think you're gonna be pushing $1 million. I don't,
No, their quote was,
oh, I thought you were talking about like permits and stuff. Yeah.
no, the permits, yeah, you said are about half a mil, but,
But you've already budgeted almost all of the architect is already budgeted.
okay, that's
There's-
true. Dina pointed.
There's like $1.5 million, I believe, that we set aside, or 1 million, whatever it was.
Because now we bought that building, so take 4.7 million off the top of that.
No, but there was a separate item in there just for architecture of a new.
400,000.
No, there was $1 million, I remember it.
We're gonna go through that
Yeah,
exercise by the end of the year, though, right?
So let's, okay, so you're saying after this next round, when is the next round, like the Zoom meeting that?
He said before Christmas, so I'm assuming,
So do you want to wait until after that to set a target?
we don't
figure?
have to do that right now, because I
We have
just
until
need,
January.
yeah, I just need to have something to put into the RFQ to get out to, you know, I already have
And
two
then from
two
there-
contractors interested.
We can get with Dina and Steve and say, okay, guys,
So,
how are we going to do this?
yeah, so for me, bottom line, we gotta get public defender and we have to have minimum 2 courtrooms. I mean, don't even start anything unless you're gonna get those items done. Now, everything else, yeah, it would be great to have, but those are the things we don't really have a choice at this.
And don't get me wrong, I don't want to see the public defender in Hayden. But what I'm saying is, if we're really going up against the wall here, and it may not work, I get it, but the thing is, how much can we spend and where do we need to make adjustments?
Well, the timing is the issue.
Yeah, that's true, too.
Hayden's not available for 3 years. We can have the building near complete in that amount of time.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Yeah, best shot, how fast do we build the first one? A building.
He said, if I remember right, in his
When would we,
proposal,
when
he's
would-
a year, so I think that he said about 2.5 years from design to move in. Is
Okay,
what I
right.
think that I remember him saying.
So
About
we-
2.5 years, and that would be the first building. So,
Right.
so here's the other
That
thing you
would
have
be
to remember.
summer of 2023.
Yeah, and here's the other thing you have to remember. If you decide to go with 2 buildings, when you give the contractor an 18 million or a $20 million number, it's for 2 buildings out over probably 6 years.
Yes.
So you do have some time to try to figure it out as you go. You want to have a plan in place,
So
obviously.
your assumption is they're building one at a time?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have to.
there's no way that
Because
this
of the
campus could take
disruption. Okay.
two major construction projects. Because you're gonna lose half of the lot back here.
Yeah, okay.
For construction and whatnot, so.
Steve, any thoughts, given what you're hearing?
Not to complicate things any longer, the building of 2 buildings over a 6-year time horizon complicates things, and I haven't factored that into what I've looked at. To go into detail that maybe you don't want to go into, the 9 million that I'm thinking of borrowing from the enterprise fund, they need it back by 2040. It's the post-closure funding, so that's the expected.
Roughly
Okay.
19, 20 years, yeah.
Right, so we would have to do some math to calculate what that delay of $6 million might result in the payback period of that 9 million.
The other thing that's interesting is they pay us annually, right? What's the figure that they pay us roughly? Is it 800,000? 800,000. So that's something that either we would deduct from or however. But that's what they're paying us today. I'm sorry?
We just have to cover that. I mean, we spend that money every year.
Exactly, yeah, has to be covered, you're right.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking of the cash flow. Okay.
Yeah, just to step back and take a bigger picture, what keeps me up at night is having enough money in uncertain financial times, because we don't know what the next year is gonna look like. We potentially have a new presidential administration.
Speak up, I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay, so there's a lot of unknowns. We're facing a lot of uncertainty politically, economically. We have a lot of deferred maintenance. And we're coming into a new budget season where we don't know if we're gonna get more stimulus money, and we probably are gonna have a lot of costs associated with COVID that we may not be covered for. Now, granted, we're probably gonna get some money from that COVID money, but we probably don't wanna just spend that right away. And that's looking still to be right around 2 million, but we don't know if that's really
That'll be your
legit or
6.
not.
Let me ask you this, based on the information that we've gotten from the tax committee, the proposed bills, and I realize they're not in session yet, in your mind, what's the worst case? Assuming they pass everything they're talking
I'm
about.
concerned that it's gonna limit our ability to fund our operation. And our biggest cost right now is people. So if we're pinched and we are unable to take our new growth, to keep up with our new growth, and take our 3% to keep up with inflation and the cost of doing business, and we don't have that foregone to pull back on if something terrible happens, then we will have to shrink our operation in a time of
You would have to what? I'm sorry, you're getting quieter as you go
We'll
on.
have to shrink our operation in a time of growth. So if we don't have enough money to keep wheels on trucks, we're gonna have to let some people go.
Yeah, layoffs.
Right, exactly. You'd have to do layoffs. And it's happened before. It happens in private industry, but
All the time.
if we're pinched, I mean, if we don't have the ability to keep the lights on, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
our biggest piece of the budget is people. And I'd hate to see that happen, especially when we're growing. But, you know, that's the economic reality. What the legislature is looking at now and what I saw at the ATI conferences, they really don't understand what we do. And I think that is dangerous for us. So,
Thank you. Steve, any final thoughts?
Leslie always tells me that I'm a pessimist, but as it relates to the legislature, I think I'm more optimistic. I think everything that they've laid out to date is gonna flop this year,
I hope you're right.
but we'll see.
Yeah, but the issue is we have to be careful because this year, fine, that's 1 year, but what about next year? What about the year after? And they're gonna keep coming for the counties as long as people are complaining about their taxes. So I have committed to spend as much time in Boise as they will allow me to testify on these issues. And I do have, you know, digits of all of our representatives that they will be hearing from me very often. So, yeah, just so they understand what it means for their hometown.
Any other questions?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you, Dina, Keith, Sean. Anything else?
Nope. I'll let you know,
And then we'll go from there.
after this next round, we can either do it as a status update, or Ken might want to call in again and kind of let you know where we're at, so.
Sure, and then we've got it on status update every week,
Yeah.
so if there's
And
any.
I think we're gonna be fine. I mean, Dina's right, there's a lot of unknowns out there, but I just don't see it pushing $24 million. I don't see that.
Okay.
Well, and once again, my priority is the public defender and 2 courtrooms. So,
Well, and your prosecuting attorney too, because he's out of room.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's, I mean,
Yeah, I totally understand that.
And my concern is the free-for-all for space. Everybody wants their own this and their own that, and their own billiard room, and tell you what, it ain't gonna happen, not at this time.
Well, they're loving the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And that's why I said what I said. It's really gonna come down to
I
what
know.
you three have to say.
Maybe the prosecutor goes to Hayden.
I'm
Never
thinking
mind.
17
He can't,
to
but-
18 million,
Yeah,
and 75,000 square feet being the absolute outside, not the beginning part to start adding to.
Right.
And I would like to see it done the cheapest way possible, and I know investors are not the cheapest way. I know a general obligation bond is. If we were to go that way, it has a very, very good chance of failing because most elected officials are very, very, very lazy about educating the public in terms of their needs. We've seen that on the jail, and we've seen that on a lot of things. They throw it out there, the $50 fee on the car. You look behind that, and the $50 fee isn't that bad. I don't agree with the way it was done, but the educational process was not lacking, it was not there.
It was insufficient.
And so, enough.
Okay, then? Okay. Public comment.
Lori, you got anything?
Nope, I think you guys covered it well. Thank you.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, so the time is now 10:08, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.